cash it. And move on.
You make me so mad, Tony. I'm currently writing a show that Tony is directing, so he'll take a lot of my words and throw them the hell away.
I don't do a lot of that, once in a while. Once in a while.
On special occasions.
I like your writing.
Okay.
Any questions about writing? We can talk about directing too.
What's up?
So I was wondering what the script looks like when you receive it before you actually have to start adapting it into the ADR. Like, do you just get the basic localized translation and then you have to choose the specific words you want to use?
Gotcha, yeah. So when you receive the script, it comes basically as a table. And you'll have a blank area where you'll put your numbers column. And what I mean by that is that you will number each individual line so that he can scroll through and find exactly where it needs to be, and so can the engineer for each actor, because not everybody's in the booth at once. You don't go linearly. You just jump through to wherever you need to be. And then you have the time code, which is for the engineer to, once again, punch in and find exactly where things begin. And then you have, usually, at BZ, this is what I received, is 2 columns with the translation in it. So I have one column that's specifically going to remain exactly as it is, which is the direct translation that we received. And then the other one is still the translation there, but that's where I get to play. So I get to, pull that out, change it, move it around, and reformat it, because not only are you writing the words, but you're also kind of writing the timing in there. So you,
Mark the pause.
yeah, you mark the pauses, you mark
Commas we don't use commas. Commas exist for phrasing,
Yes.
but we don't use them for timing.
Right. Commas for me are more of an acting thought when you're in the booth, specifically for anime. That's how you know. Commas exist kind of to tell you where your thought has changed, almost. You don't breathe there, you don't change anything there, but you've almost completed part of a thought, and then you had a comma, and then something else hits your mind, and you think about something else sometimes. That can give you a new beat.
My favorite mantra, there are no commas in anime.
It's true.
I say it so much, she made me a coffee cup that says it.
Yes, he uses it to beat the actors. But yeah, you have to, not only are you changing the dialogue, but you're also notating for the actors so that they know before we even get the preview what they're really looking at. So you'll have little notations that say like MSN, or MNS, sorry, I'm dyslexic. Oh my God, I can't believe I have this job. And that means mouth not seen. And so that's when somebody's speaking, but you're looking at the back of their head or at a beautiful cherry tree or whatever the hell, that's not their face, and you can't see their mouth moving. So you don't necessarily have to match the flaps and timing for that sync, and you'll have an underline to let you know that that's off camera. And then, hi, come on in, have a seat, join us. And then if partway through the line, because you'll have, mouth not seen to on, and then you'll suddenly have a character on screen and their mouth will be moving. So you have to try to time yourself well enough to know exactly what word is going to be on camera and where, and know where those pauses and hitches are in the middle of it so that it all kind of flows seamlessly together. That's fun.
So let me give you quickly the process, but then I'll answer the question. The process of writing is fairly the same for everybody. You look at the video, the line, you watch it, so you can see how fast it is, where the thumb. You read the translation. The first thing I do is I try to read the translation against the picture, because sometimes it works, and it sounds good enough, and you just leave it alone.
Yep. And the clients love it when you do that because you're staying true to the original translation.
Then if it doesn't fit, then I'm going to look for, well, how can I arrange this? I'm going to change the sentence somewhat, maybe pull out a word, maybe add a word. I try to keep the same keywords in because it triggers the clients. If they don't get the keywords, sometimes they go, well, that's not it. So you want to give them that. And then I try stuff. I'll read it, I'll try, okay, I think it's going to be, it goes this way, and then it pauses, and then goes this way. So I'll try, I'm going to go out. Okay, I'm short. So I'm going to add stuff until it fits. And then read it back, and it can take anywhere from 2 or 3 minutes to write a line, to sometimes a half hour, 40 minutes trying to figure out a complicated bit of sync. When you have this much information you have to gather, and you only have that much time.
And it takes longer the more that you have to stop and cry to yourself about what the choices you make in your life. But no, that's absolutely exactly right. That's how people will usually go through it. They'll try to stick to the translation as much as you can. You'll change the syntax, which is like take the back end of the sentence and put it forward. however you can switch it around to try to make it flow.
And then you have the problem in Japan about the tsundere, that attitude where you have to work that into your script.
Yes.
Because the line has to be tsundere, tsundere is behaving differently
Than what you feel.
But it is very common. It's one of the most common devices in Japanese literature. And so we have to deal with that within the line. So the line is actually a little tsundere too.
Well, that's touching on making sure your characters have their own individual voices. Because a lot of times, and this can happen early on as a writer, not just in adapting, but as a writer, each character, they're going to say things differently, they're going to have a different vocabulary that they use, they're going to have different words that they lean towards. And, you can't have like a 7-year-old child saying the word indubitably. I mean, unless they're, from Cold Case or something like that. Or Case Closed, and then that's completely different. But it's really important to remember to stay true to specific characters. Like if you've got a princess, she's going to speak a little bit more elevated. If you've got a street rat, I don't know why we're going into Aladdin right now, but they're gonna, they're going to do different things. They're gonna use different words. They're gonna use different phrasing, and it only serves the project and the actors as well if you can lean into that so that they have a better grasp on where they're coming from. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Oh yeah. He trained me to do this stuff, so whatever I write, if you don't like it, it's his fault. Yeah.
Too much of that shit in my life.
Ain't that the truth?
Where's your question answered?
It was kind of like a more specific question. You mentioned something earlier about like sometimes we'll change an attack name or something like that.
Right.
Has there ever been a situation where you named something and then it later came back to bite you in the ass?
Yes. But only on Rangers, because Rangers I got to make the names up. But on, we did this as a group. In anime and video games, those names and callouts are specific often to cards and game pieces and things in manga, and we can't change them at all, even if it doesn't sing.
Right. I've run into that on Fate recently. I'm in really lovely communication with the clients as well, and so sometimes I'll have a question like, oh hey, so this is what's in front of me, and I'll have there was a character that existed that had in the character, because you'll have the character name column. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that. There's a name column to tell you who is speaking at whatever given time, and there was a name in the column that was not the same as the name in the translation. And the name that was, I think, in the column fit the flaps far better than the name that was in the translation. And so I said, which one are we using? Please tell me it's the one in the name column. And they said, no. And I was like, oh, okay. That's fine, but sometimes you need to do that because it reflects something that's canon. It reflects something that's, this has a lot to do with the game, because Fate Grand Order is a game, and that has quite the following. And so you want to make sure that you're staying as true to that as possible to not only honor the original property, but the fandom as well, because they dearly love a lot of these things, right?
Yeah, and so now you know when you're watching anime, when you ever get to one of those places where there's a big call out, it's a big call out, something very specific or has a toy, and you'll notice sometimes there'll be an extra flap or two in there that aren't covered. We're not being stupid, we just can't change it.
Not allowed, not a thing to do. Yeah, or sometimes
Those things are trademarks too.
Yeah. Or sometimes you have far more to say in a really small amount of time. And that's really fun. We had a lot of fun.
We are allowed to sometimes, let's take this line and move it, because he says, let me go.
Yep.
And then I'm going down to the office, it's like that. So sometimes if it's appropriate, we'll flip it around. We do have to tell the producers we're doing that, so the people regarding the scripts can look at it and make sure it's okay. Sometimes it's not, but most of the time.
Yeah, you've seen notes like that of mine in the script before. Like, oh, this information's already been revealed way the heck up there, so I'm going to take what I've got in this loop that's down here where there's not enough time to say it and put it up here so that we have the same amount of information and it keeps the scene coherent, but the actor's not going to have a stroke.
And the best writers you can't tell, because if you don't lose style, it all looks like it flows and was originally that way. So, any other questions? Yes.
So when you're writing for the script, you're looking at the mouse flash while you're doing it, or?
So when you receive these things, you receive the direct translation, the table that I was just talking with you about, and you'll receive a video of the Japanese performance, basically, of the finished product, right? And so you can, and then on the top corner you'll have the time code, so you can match it to each loop that you've got, because it will have already been hopefully time coded. At least that's what
Yeah,
BC does.
the time code is the number on the top, has hours, minutes, seconds, and frames.
Yes.
There's 24 frames per second.
Yes, and each loop it begins like at the frame, so you'll know exactly where it is by the millisecond where this person begins speaking.
24th.
But the 24th of a second. Listen, I'm not a mathematician. I can count to 3 and that's it. Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Excellent.
So yes.
More questions at all? Yes.
How is the pay?
How is the pay?
It depends on the studio, it depends on the project.
When you're starting out, the pay's okay.
Yep.
It's sufficient to the job.
Yep.
But the place where budgets have been squeezed the most over the last 15 years has been among the writers, because they didn't organize. The actors organized, and they kept the rates from the top to bottom rate. The unions, obviously, they were organized. The directors were individuals, and we negotiated for ourselves. But the writers as a group have not negotiated together, so their rates are pretty low. Which means, I'm gonna throw out a number that's kind of an average number across, because every place is a little different. You're gonna make about $600 on an ADR script. In that neighborhood, could be a little less, could be a little bit more. And that ADR script is gonna take about 20 hours to make, to write. When you first start, it's gonna take you longer. I got it down to about 3 days. But that's tough. But I've been doing it a long time. I can dream and sing, you know. For original scripts, it's really depending on who you're working for. An original feature film, it's low budget, you may make $5-10 grand on. If it's full union, you're gonna make $60,000 on it at the minimum.
And if you're starting out creating your own original content, you're writing for free until somebody purchases it.
Yep.
There's no guarantee that somebody's gonna pick this up and say, yes, I'd like to create it.
And at first, you don't own it either. They own it.
Right, and they'll own it. And after that, even if they do pick it up and say, yes, I would like the rights to this property, there's still not a guarantee it's going to get made. You'll get a paycheck by then, hopefully, but it still may not see the light of day depending on production.
Most ADR writers do a combination of things.
Yeah.
They're writing, they're acting, they're directing, and not necessarily on anime. They may have a job at a theme park, being a stage manager, or something along those lines. I know, I'm just thinking of it.
Yeah, I'm writing and acting, obviously, and
But those people who are writing full-on cartoons and stuff like that, they're making 10-12 grand a script. And yeah, you can live on that.
Yeah,
You're writing 5 to 8 scripts a year at least, if you're writing professionally and full-time,
Yeah.
so.
then there are writers' rooms and things like that.
Yeah, that's a whole other animal. I've never actually worked in a writer's room.
It's weird.
To me, a writer's room looks like a bunch of writers sitting around giving the showrunner all their best ideas so he can steal them. That's what it looks like to me. And
It depends on the room.
Yeah. Yes.
How does one apply to be a writer? Is it kind of you have to know a person?
Yeah, you gotta get invited, actually. Well, I might as well approach that.
Go ahead.
At Adventures in Voice Acting, we're gonna start offering ADR writing and directing class sometime in the late spring. It's going to be expensive. We've just developed a program. I've been trying to teach ADR writing for my entire career. And I've had very little success. The people who would try it, they just don't get it, they fall apart.
What are you trying to say?
No, you've done well. But when I was at Saban, I think I trained 150 different people, and out of those 150 people, only one succeeded and is still working, and that's Kurt Thornton. And it was a 2-weekend class. Well, now the way I teach it is a 3-month program, which requires you a lot of commitment, and you got to write. You end up writing a whole script by the time you're done. You have to come into sessions. There's a lot of commitment, and there's a lot of time commitment for you, an enormous amount for me and the staff. So that's why it's going to be expensive. But we're going to be offering that soon. Otherwise, most of the writers come from the actors,
Yeah.
because we already know they know character and they know sync. And the rest is just, hopefully they can pull that all together and write the dialogue too.
Yeah, that's how kind of Carly's trying to.
Yeah. And you've been writing what, maybe 6 months?
Yeah, about that. I started
And already on a fake series.
oh my god. Dude, they started me on Lupin stuff. I was like, really? You want to trust me with this? You fools! That's somehow.
Pretty for a character that talks like this isn't too difficult.
You would think that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of question over here.
I wanted to ask generally, like, what are the logistics of employment? Are you guys, and more specifically, are you guys contracted? Are you salaried
It's
sometimes?
Freelance. You're a freelancer, so you'll be hired case by case. You'll be hired project by project. Sometimes you'll be hired episode by episode. It really just depends. Say if there's a show that's already going on and you've got a writer that needs to come away from it for some reason, for some other project or a family thing or what have you. Sometimes people will swoop in and write a couple of episodes for them. I've seen that happen. Yeah, see, and you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or you were just talking about you were breaking up episodes, so sometimes it's section by section. It can really depend, especially in this freelance world. The same thing as an actor, depending on the length of the series or the type of character you have. You know, if you're going in for just specifically incidentals where you're like student B or guard A or what have you, then you're hired and fired in the same day, just about. You know, so it's really inconsistent until it's not. I've been very, very fortunate in jumping on the Fate series because there's a certain number of episodes, and I know that that's going to go on for a certain amount of time. That's been really good for my blood pressure. But yeah, it's a hustle, and you know.
And it's changing.
Yeah.
This new law that's about the gig economy and Ubers is actually affecting the writing community
Yeah.
badly. In a very
I don't
bad way.
like it.
Vox Media has now stated they're no longer going to hire local writers and hire the writers out of state. So they don't have to bring them in as employees because they're too expensive. You can't bring them. A writer will make, to keep the writer making as much money as they make, it would be, they're getting paid like one of the senior executives by the time you're done paying them a salary over a year. And it's just not practical for the companies. The economy just won't support that. So there's going to have to be some changes, and I think some of that will get backed off. Writers Guild right now is petitioning the state legislature to make some changes and do an exception. Yeah, it could hurt you. It could hurt all of us. We're all worried about it. I keep asking accounting at Van Zoom, so are there changes? This is so far no. So.
I don't want to talk about this part.
For regular scripts, by the way, you're paid in groups. You're usually paid upon treatment. When you draw treatment is kind of like an outline, a little bit more fleshed out. So you're paid something on treatment, you're paid something on first draft, you're paid the rest of it in the final draft.
Right, and that's usually happening when you've got a little bit more experience under your belt. You'll be hired on as a writer because you've got experience as a writer. And then they'll say, okay, we either they'll come to you with a concept or you'll have a concept that they'd like to purchase. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. And so they'll say, we want a movie about this, could you write something like that? And then you'll give them a pitch as to what you would do to create a story surrounding what they're asking for, and then they'll hire you on, and then you'll go forward.
For me, most of the first writing jobs I ever had were rewriting. We're taking existing stuff and just kind of fixing it.
Touching up.
Which is how I ended up writing a movie, because I was asked to kind of go through this movie. They wanted me to direct it. If it ever gets funded, I'm going to direct it. But they wanted me to look at the script over as a director, and then they weren't happy with it, and if I would please rewrite it, so that it would be good. Well, if I have to direct this thing, I surely want to rewrite it. And got about a third of the way through, and realized that it's a whodunit, but they already told you who did it in the script.
Well.
Yeah, I was like, guys, it's 10 pages in, I know who did it. So I changed who did it.
Yeah.
Left the script the same, but changed who did it. And we completely rewrote the last 2/3 of the script, which is how I learned how to write a movie. Because I'd worked and directed with films and love, but I never had to write one. But to have to rewrite, get my hands in it, and realize that the script to be fixed needs to go this direction, and now I have to write it all, made a huge difference, and it was very educational. So if you want to write movies, the first thing you need to do is sit down and write a movie.
Yeah.
It's never Excel, because you're just learning, but sit down and write a movie. It's really hard, by the way. It's really hard.
I would also say get your hands on screenplays.
Yeah.
If you can read screenplays. I mean, reading regular plays is great too, but the formatting between a screenplay and a stage play is completely different. And you'll want to know. And if you would like to write for animation in particular, not just anime, but animation itself, you'll want to look at scripts like that as well, because that's going to be a little bit different from screenplay.
Tremendous amount of description in animation, which is not in regular live action.
Right.
In fact, you put a lot of description in live action, the director can get mad at you and yell at you to stop directing from the script. That's his job, his or her job.
Yeah, the first thing if you want to be a writer, the first thing I would tell you to do would be read and then write, or both. Is there another question?
No questions about it? Yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure if this has been asked already, but from what I can understand, ADR for like anime dubbing is like to match the dialogue with the left flaps as much as possible. Were there any instances where like the dialogue matched the longer left flaps almost perfectly, or?
Yes, we pray for those moments.
Those are
That's one thing I don't have to write.
Those are delightful. Yeah, you sometimes you'll have the translation, and especially if you've got a really lovely translator who's very well versed in both languages, and they can create something that's already cohesive, then that's great. And then sometimes, or actually oftentimes, it'll actually fit. You can move it right over, and that'll already make your client happy, and that's nice.
There are some clients though that I've run into, and the one that I work
Yeah.
on the other show I direct.
Right.
I don't want to be specific, but their notes are a little different. Their translation things are a little bit different, and
Right.
I don't know my point. I just
Oh, well, I think what you're talking about is knowing when you need to change or manipulate something that may not necessarily fit, even though it might.
Yeah, most of it needs. If it's the rule of thumb is if it's a toy, if it's a call out, if it's a place or a specific name,
A plot point, yeah.
Yeah, you don't change it.
Right,
You even if it doesn't quite match the flaps, that's fine.
right.
And then sometimes you just have to, sometimes,
Yeah.
and different shops, I mean, Advanced Zoom are pretty tight about it.
Mhm.
At Sentai, not so much. Sentai Filmworks, not so much. So there's a different standard depending on where you are.
Right.
And some properties require that perfect sync. A Fate Zero out of sync would be terrible. But you get One Piece or something like that where it's a raucous comedy, it's a lot of sync.
Yeah.
Who cares? It's funny.
And it also changes with the animation style, because there are some that are very realistic things. There are some that are really intricate, especially around the mouth area. So you want to try to pay a little bit more attention to that because it's an artistic choice. And often I'll try to it's called internal sync, because you want to. When you're writing, you want to try at least to hit the first couple that are working for you, and then the last couple, and any pauses. You want to hit those as well as you possibly can. But every once in a while, you'll see a character's mouth move in a very particular shape, like an ooh, or ah, or e, or something like that. And you want to try to hit those as well as you can as well, right? And that can be in the middle of the line somewhere. And then there's also some artistic choice that you can make, whereas say in the Japanese sensibility, you'll notice if you're watching a sub, a lot of the characters will be using each other's names a whole lot more, in fact, than you
In
would.
every sentence.
In every sentence when they're addressing each other, or even it's just that's just the reply. It's
Or
just,
they're talking in third person.
right, they'll just use this other person's name, or they use their own name, or what have you. And while we'll keep some of that, whatever we can remove to maybe either replace with information or a point of view or something else, we will, as far as we're allowed to take it.
Yep. She said. More questions? Yes.
So instead of going through the ADR of syncing audio to lips, why not sync lips to the audio?
Well, we do that sometimes.
Mhm.
It's very rare because it's really expensive.
Yes.
You have to, now you're bringing, now you have to have a program called Maya to break down all the elements, and if you don't have that, then you're really restricted. There's not much you can do but just edit, actually, loop things. So to break the layers apart. So now you have to hire an animator who knows how to do that.
Yeah.
And they're not cheap. Bang Zoom has an animator on staff just for this sort of stuff. But it's, but when he does stuff, it ain't cheap. And to do an entire film that way would just be, the entire series would just be cost prohibitive.
So whenever I've seen something like that happen, you're really choosy about where we can do that. So for the most part, you're still gonna match the previously done animation as much as you possibly can. But oftentimes it'll be requested, most likely by the client themselves, saying they'd like a reanimation here on this particular line because of some sort of very important thing. So then they'll change that. Like we did that
We did it on Doraemon.
on Beyblade.
Well, when Beyblade, we're not allowed to reanimate. We can loop, and we can extend shots a little bit in order to keep flaps going.
Right.
But we don't have the elements to actually break it down and reanimate.
But on Doraemon.
On Doraemon, we did. So we were able to take, there was a couple of scenes which took place in bathtubs. So we were able to put shorts on the naked guys. you know, things like that. And change, if you notice Naruto and Bleach, they have no kanji in them. Because there's a guy that comes in and erases the kanji and puts English in. And we do that here in the States. Anyway. So it's possible to do it. Where the state of the art is on that, though, is in video games. Because it used to be on a lot of the Japanese JPRGs and Japanese role-playing games, we would have to match their timing exactly within 5 frames. And that's really hard to do, especially if you have somebody who doesn't have any rhythm. People who are musically inclined tend to be able to do it, but I have people who are not, and they just couldn't get it. And so what they do now on a lot of these games is they have a module inside of the game that matches movement to audio waveform, so that we don't have to worry about the timing. The computer will extend or contract it on its own based on the length of the waveform, but you have no sync then. The mouth is going this. You know, that's why video games look so bad sync-wise.
Everyone.
Because they don't want to have to do it exactly. It's too expensive. And they want to do it in 22 languages. I'm not kidding. Netflix, you deliver something to Netflix, you are, unless you get somebody else to do it for you, you must deliver your show in 22 languages. Not cheap. Yes?
Okay, so it's funny that you bring up that basically the auto sync, because I've been working with Adobe on and off because they have their architecture for it now too, for 2D animation.
Yeah, that's over.
And I'm just like, oh no.
I'm not hopeful.
Yeah, it's like, it's really cool, but I'm like, oh, for all of that, like, really, like, intricate stuff, which actually looks good, it's going to cause a really bad effect.
But bottom line, if you want good animation, you need an animator.
Yeah, exactly.
Hands-on, if you want good animation. Computer is a tool.
Exactly.
It shouldn't be doing your
If you want
animating
it
for you.
cheap, if you want it cheap,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's cheap, fast, and good. That's that whole
Yeah.
joke. It's very true for cheap. There's 3 ways. You can cheap, fast, and good. You can have any 2. You can't have that. You can't have the third.
you can't have your cake and eat it too.
Yeah.
No.
More questions? Yes.
So, okay, so continuing with the whole ADR and flip flaps thing, is writing for ADR a little, I'm not sure if this was covered already, but is it a little harder if the lip flaps are actually making words in their original language?
Yes, actually that's a great question, because most of them don't. Most of them are pretty flat. Occasionally they'll round up, and sometimes they'll go into an ah formation, but it's basically flat, ooh, and ah, the only positions they get in there. And so yeah, we can do that. But there are some high-end animations, or even live action,
Yeah, live action.
where we have to be, it takes twice as long to write, because we have to be really careful about making sure the right word is on the right mouth shape. And the more they shape their mouths, the harder that becomes.
Well, the interesting thing that I've also seen in live action stuff, if you've got foreign films, there are some that are they're specifically shot in a way that they know that it's going to be dubbed over in English. So you can tell they'll do a lot more shots from over the shoulder, or they'll do a lot more shots where you can't necessarily see the mouth so well, and they're doing that on purpose because they would like for it to be dubbed into English because money is over there.
Well, also, I worked on a film a few years ago called Cinderella Moon. If you ever come across it, I highly recommend it. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Right now you can only get it from a charity website that rescues orphans from China, or something, orphan females from China. But it's the original Snow White story from 700 years, or from 750. Apparently, not Snow White.
Cinderella.
Cinderella.
That's the name of the show.
Yes, Cinderella Moon. Oh, jeez, I never got that. No, I'm just kidding. But that one was the one that he wanted to be perfect. And if you've ever seen the dub from Crouching, the best dub I've ever seen was Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's very difficult to tell. They used a combination of really good lip flaps and a couple of scenes that had some lip reel animations. But that was just a couple of scenes. They wanted it like that. And so it takes a lot longer. They had to pay more because it takes longer. And it took a lot longer in the studio and that stuff. So it's possible to do it, but most people don't because it's just not cost effective. More questions? I'm also a director too, we'll talk about that. What a director does.
I've also noticed with specific directors and things, each director has their own specific style as to what they find acceptable or unacceptable with sync. I know that Wendy Lee in particular is very particular about the internal sync. She wants to make sure that as many of the words as possible can fit each phonation and movement of the mouth. Whereas I think Alex Von David is a little less strict on that, and
He's more interested on just the right line.
he's more interested on the right line, on the right emotion. I've been in the booth for him, and he is notorious for being very beloved with the reactions, almost more so than the dialogue itself, because I think for him a lot of the acting is in just the audible sound rather than the words.
In Japanese products, it actually is, to a great extent. A lot of in Japan, and this is something the writers have to pay attention to, in Japan it's often more important what's not said than what is. So you have to keep that in mind as a writer too, that there's an underlying, there's a subtext going on. And so that's an important thing, yes?
Yeah, I would be interested in knowing how you do directing for scenes where if we were going to do it, there would definitely be some sound effects. Like I saw one director working with an actor on a racing movie, and there was a scene where the characters were cringing and they were making obvious movements, and there were no sound effects whatsoever in the Japanese.
Oh,
He said,
no reactions or efforts or anything like that?
nothing. Well, you just wanted to make sounds, you know.
Right.
If we were Americans, that's what we do
Yeah.
with those characters, and he did. He had to do that for that
Right.
reason. Did you come across that often?
Yeah, I'm starting to think it's a dollars and cents issue, because if you shoot, when you shoot, even a cartoon, an original, something that's going to be animated later, you're not sure how everything's going to land, or how it's going to end up when it's cut. So you give as many of those reactions as you can, but often those, you're doing an action scene in live action, there's often a lot of equipment going on around that obscures the sound, so they don't even record the sound and they dub it later. Dubbing's expensive.
Well,
So they just leave it alone because that's the style there. We won't stand for it. So if I bring a live action movie over from Korea, for instance, well, Koreans actually make really good movies right now. But let's say the old Korean films that weren't so good, and they had a situation like that, I would have taken upon myself as a director to bring in a group and actually add all that stuff.
well,
to it.
this was an anime. This was
Okay.
an anime movie, and they had not put any
Yeah.
sound
In that
effects in it at
case-
But
all.
listen to old Astro Boy.
Yeah.
There's absolutely nothing. It's just dialogue and hiss.
Right. And in that case, sometimes that depends on the property itself, because I've been in shows where, or they'll actually notate that in the script if there's a reaction or something like that's going on that's not actually recorded in the original Japanese performance. It'll often be notated and it'll say it's niage, which is not in original Japanese. And then the director has the prerogative to either fill that space or not fill that space. I know that I've worked on shows where we've definitely filled that or played with it or gone along with that whole animation or chased it so that there's something to place there. And then, like for the Fate series, notoriously Fate, especially in the fight scenes, right?
Yeah, they want only certain moments, but the rest they want the music to carry it.
Yeah.
They had music and sound
No,
effects.
they
too.
didn't. There was no music. It was
Yes,
just,
that's just bad filmmaking.
it was just. There was one character giving instructions, and the reaction of the soldiers was what was going on. That they were all.
Well, there's also been a bit of a swing of the pendulum. When I first started back in the 80s, we covered everything. If the character did this, we did. We put a noise to almost every movement. It got ridiculous. So it actually gone way too far the other way, where every little movement and stuff had a squeak or a noise or a hum.
Now you're gonna
or
hate
something.
having me in the booth because I do that.
Oh, I'm gonna hurt you. And now we're a little more judicious with it. We try to keep it sounding natural. And I think the Japanese sometimes, they just either forget or they don't want to bring the actors back in. And the relationship between the producers, this is another thing.
Yeah.
Because the relationship with the producers and the actors and the artists in Japan is very different than here.
Yeah.
Those actors are big stars over there. They're major celebrities. And they're treated with such respect, they sometimes don't direct them because they don't want to correct them out of respect. Yeah, so that's when you get
It's a
some
big
really
deal.
weird performances out of some actors.
And me, I live in Van Nuys, so.
That deal.
And so that impacts the outcome, and that impacts how it is we approach it and when we write and when we don't write. Is that, I think I talked around in a circle. I hope I didn't confuse you.
Yeah. And then there's another situation, like if you're doing an original animation. I recently, it's not out yet, but I was working on a project that was calling itself an anime, but it was also original animation because they were animating to the English performances rather than the Japanese, but they were being kind of created at the same time. And so we went in, and it was a pre-lay session, so there were other actors in the booth with me. We were working together kind of like you would a radio play. And we did that, and we finished the episode, and that went to production. And then I got brought back later on, once they'd finished some of the animation, in order to fill in some of those spaces with efforts and things, like running and jumping and hiding under stuff, and all the noises you make.
Our standards are a little different here. In Japan, there's 4 different dialects of Japanese, 3 or 4 different dialects of Japanese that are spoken. So everything they do there is dubbed. It's all dubbed. All of their programming is dubbed in various, whatever, Mandarin or not Mandarin, that's Chinese, but in the various
Dialects. Yeah.
Thank you.
I saw a question over here, though.
Okay, we'll get it.
Okay, go ahead.
So I lost my place. So
Oh,
that's-
sorry, my fault. But yeah, everything over there is dubbed, so you were saying that they have different standards for
So they
whether or
have
not
different
to film
standards,
those
so they're
movies.
used to seeing stuff out of sync. They're
Yeah.
used to watching American products out of sync.
And
We're
then-
not. We're used to watching American products perfectly in sync, and a lot of you can see when even can see when the American stuff is not. Because sometimes it's not.
We're brats about it. It's okay.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. There's a
Wait, you have a
question.
question?
Oh, thank you.
How common is it for the director to be the writer?
Up until recently.
Is there any other conflict of interest with that?
No, up until recently, that was just the way everybody did it. I mean, up until just the last couple of years, I would only direct the things I wrote. It's easier because I know how to correct myself.
Alex Von David does that still.
Alex Von David still writes everything. Alex Von David actually watches entire series and reads all the manga before he ever watches them in the booth.
He is.
I don't have
deep
that.
in
I don't have that kind of time. Oh God, I'm tired.
Oh. I mean,
I had one more thing to say about that, and it just went.
for the most part, the directors that I've worked with, they haven't all
Oh.
written it, like everything. There have been some, i.e. Alex Von David, but for the most part, directors are not necessarily writing the scripts that they have in the booth, but they are definitely adapting any dialogue that's not necessarily working. And it's not that what they receive is necessarily bad or what have you. It's every
different
actor
actors
has
have
different
different.
cadence.
Yeah, different actors have different cadences.
Yeah, so there will be a little bit of change, manipulation, they'll remove an extraneous word or what have you, because each person speaks differently.
Yeah. Plus the turnarounds now are much faster. We're all doing simuldubs now.
Yeah.
So the turnarounds are very fast. It was a lot like doing back in Power Rangers. Power Rangers. We just had to crank these episodes out as fast as we could, or the big green programming machine would eat us and kill us. So we don't have time to spend 2 weeks at home writing and then 2 weeks in the studio recording, because that's what I used to do. But I'd have 2 or 3 shows going at once. I'd be writing every night when I got home. I'd be directing during the day. I was literally working 18 hours a day, and it just doesn't pay enough to make that worth my while.
And that's sort
So
of
less and less are we seeing directors only directing the stuff they write. In fact, I don't write at all anymore.
Yeah.
Because I can make more money directing, frankly, and now I get to see my wife at night.
Good for you, buddy. Yeah, I go to the studio, I'll record and work on different shows all day, and then I'll come home and I'll write. And if I'm not recording that day, I'll stay in my cave and I'll write forever. And that's what I do. I don't see the sun much.
Yeah, show business ain't as glamorous as most people think.
Not necessarily. It can be fun. You had a question, my
Yeah, that
darling.
was really my question. Like,
Oh.
what's the time frame from getting the script on the assembly or it's about?
It depends.
Yeah.
Right now, we're recording 2 episodes every other week.
Yeah.
Mhm.
The first of those 2 episodes will air the Saturday right after we recorded it.
Yep.
It's really fast. The other one
No
will be
pressure.
the week later. So we're trying to get a week ahead right now.
Yeah.
But so that she'll get a script. Let's say she'll get the materials on Monday.
Yep, they'll
You
want
have to
by.
have it in by Thursday.
I'm supposed to have, actually, my due date was Friday.
Okay,
It
so
would be
Friday-
Monday to Friday.
so
I
give
just
her
turned
5
it in.
days.
I turned it in early because I like you.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
So 5 days for an episode,
Yeah.
and it'll take us. If we're just doing 1 episode at a time, which we rarely do, but on Fake we actually had to do that.
I think Shield Hero did one at a time.
Yeah, it'll take roughly a day and a half, 2 days to record. Probably two days to record, maybe 2 1/4 if it's really talking. And then it's going to take another full day to edit, to do the dialogue editing. And then the sound effects cleanups are done at the same time. And then it takes at least 1/2 to a full day to mix it. And then everybody has to approve it, and we have a day or 2 to do fixes and final mixes, and then we send it off.
Have there been instances where something happens and you have you just have to send it off, or like?
No, never send off bad product.
No.
No, it's better, even though it's the worst sin in the world to miss an air date, it's better than sending a piece of crap.
Yeah.
The only time it's ever come up with me, by the way, was I was in Australia working on a Power Ranger movie, and they sent me the materials to do the ADR for the TV series, and because we had to do the ADR and then get it back to the States so it could air. And FedEx, this is before you could send files over the internet. FedEx sent the materials to Melbourne, and I was in Sydney. So by the time I got it, we recorded it, but it didn't make it on the air. It's the only air date I missed in my entire career. Yeah. And it was FedEx's fault, wasn't it?
What was that?
Sorry, this isn't necessarily a writing question, but I'm an engineer, and you just said sound effects, and I've never heard that for a dub.
Well, they're all done. I mean, most of them do it. Sometimes you have to edit, you'll clip a sound effect, so you'll have to come in and repair it and just drop it in. Sometimes we're editing the show so severely that somebody's got to bridge the gap and just, either take this and loop it in, or there's different techniques of using the existing effect again. Especially now, there's plugins that will isolate melodies and things like that, so that helps you out.
I have no idea, I can barely use Excel.
Yeah, so that's what's that. If you have a show like Doraemon or Naruto, where it's really heavily done, and they actually replace the music on Naruto, then you're doing a full sound effect. You're using what's there, but you're doing a full sound effects edit at that point. Since most of the sounds are already there, it's going to take you a day instead of 2 or 3.
So you're actually adding more sound?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes, like I said on Naruto, they're changing out the music, so none of the sound effects are good, because they're all married to the music. So
are you guys using stems or M&Es?
Rarely do we get stems.
Wow!
So most of the time we get M&Es. On Doraemon we had the stems, so we could on that one, but most of the time we just get an M&E. We'll get an M&E, and we'll get an isolated dialogue track.
Wow.
So we have something to go by.
I get it now.
Yeah. Sorry, we just got really into the weeds here.
I'm lost.
Yes.
This is tracing back a little bit more to the writing aspect, because talking about the editing is you mentioned that Japanese actors tend to have a lot more control, a lot more sway. Is there ever a time when doing ADR that an actor here might want to refinagle a sentence or write a line in the booth?
It depends on what property we're working on. Different people, for instance, I direct Beyblade. Beyblade Burst Rise is the current version.
Yep.
I got a lot of leeway there.
Yep.
I can move things around, I can change words, and sometimes they don't like it, but they'll let me plead my case. And, on any of the Fate series, it's what it is, and it's important. It's what it is. And I, as much as I want to change things, there's a good reason for it, and so we have to kind of trust that.
You mean that as an actor?
As a director too. You guys think directors actually have choices?
Hilarious.
Just like the actor,
Yeah.
I'm answering to someone. And in fact, in the ADR world, in television, television is a producer's medium. They get to say. So if I got in that case, producer next to me tells me he wants it this way, I got to do it that way. I will recommend, I will give my professional opinion, but I'm still on the bottom line.
One of the curses that I face as a writer and actor at the same time is that now I can, when I'm in the booth and I see something that maybe I would have done differently, I can see that I would do something differently, and it makes me want to pull out my eyeballs. So, because I'm a control freak and that's bad. But you also need to gauge what your, number one, like he said, the property can be very, very particular about exactly the words that you're using, and then sometimes they're not necessarily that. And then your relationship with the director, if I'm going to walk in and work with a director I've never worked with before, I'm not going to walk in and say, this is shit, let me change it. That's going to be bad. Don't do that.
Don't laugh, it's happening.
People have done that, and then they don't necessarily work with that person anymore, and maybe they don't know why. But, depending on what kind of dialogue you have between the director and what have you, and you're looking at the script in front of you, and if it's a small change, such as perhaps in the line previous you used the word that to start the sentence, and then the next line you have also starts with that, and you say, hey, it's a little repetitive there, it's probably just a nothing thing, could we change this word to such and such, these, or, over there, or something else that would fit in that spot that would really not change the meaning at all to the dialogue, but maybe make it flow a little bit more cohesively. Sometimes you can do that. And when I am doing that, I'll try to be, number one, as respectful as possible, etc. when I'm talking to him. And say something like, hey, is it okay if I audition something for you? And then they'll say either yes or actually no, that's okay, we're happy with what we have here. Please try to work with it. And I'll be like, okay. But I mean, sure, no problem. Like an actor.
You just stare me down.
Well, usually you blink right back because you agree.
Okay. We've been working together a while.
Oh, wow. We spent time.
Any more questions? We have a couple more minutes.
I got a couple thoughts, feelings. Yes?
Do you guys have any suggestions or advice for folks who are looking into doing more ADR writing, say, like, any ADR?
Yeah, start practicing. Practice with your subs. See if you can take that subtitle line and manipulate it so it fits in the mouth. It's over there.
And sometimes that's what you receive, by the way. You don't always get a translation. You sometimes might receive
No,
the
first,
sub.
the current Fate series, what you're getting
Yeah,
is the
sub.
subtitle, not
Which
the
is
actual title.
interesting because
It's missing information.
because the way that subs are written, they try to keep it, however long it's going to be on the screen. They judge how long it's going to take someone to read this, and it's going to pop off the screen, so they know that they have to pull a whole bunch of information out. And there's definitely information in there that I would love to have.
Yeah, the first time I saw Fate Heaven's Feel, I was going to direct this thing, I was terrified. I watched this entire film from stem to stern in the theater with 1,000 other people. I had no idea what was going on. And when I finally saw the final translation and everything, it's because there was a lot of stuff missing from the sub. And if I'd known that, I would have understood the movie.
Right. When I first started writing this series, they sent me the first episode that I was going to be working with the translation, and they sent me the Excel files with the direct translation of the game and the glossary to stick with and try to find things. It wasn't necessary.
They're not particularly useful glossaries.
No, they aren't necessarily, but if I find like a phrasing or something that I'm not familiar with, I can take a look and see if, is this just a strange translation, or is this something that really is within the universe of this show, game, what have you, and I'll go and find it there. And sometimes sometimes you'll have a line or something that you're going to be working on, and you'll have about that much information, and you have 12 seconds to say it. And you're like, oh, well, you speak very slowly. But it's actually very important to keep in mind, because often you'll have a line such as that, and a lot of times, especially if you're newer, you'll be inclined to add a lot of filler words that just things that are not necessarily adding any sort of information, but it gives you a little bit more time.
There's a couple of producers that prevent you from using the words really and just.
Yes, one of which I'm working with at the moment. And I love her dearly, and she's totally right. You want to strive for a higher standard, and sometimes the word just is totally viable and necessary to what you're trying to say, but sometimes it's not. So you need to find other ways to lengthen what you're trying to say, and sometimes. So I'll go through, I'll find the original canon stuff, I'll look for these characters, because often when this is happening to me, it's usually we're talking about a character. This is this person, this is who they are in the lore, this is the mythology behind them, and things like that. But sometimes I'll say, they're a god. And then you have 12 seconds. And so I'll go through and find the mythos behind them within the Fate series and the mythos behind them within real life, because so many of the Fate characters exist in lore or history, and figure out what's going to fit in there that's not going to make people mad at me.
Last question.
What are your recommended steps for someone who wants to get into this field?
In the writing side?
Sure, yeah.
First, start practicing.
Right.
Start taking the subs and start seeing if you can even do it, because not everybody can do it.
Yeah.
And the process is, once you've done, you got to read it out loud in the picture. If you're not reading it out loud, then you're not, and in character. So there's a little bit of performance, because that's how you know who's going to sing. So that's the first thing. Second thing is to start networking a little bit
Yeah.
among people that do this sort of thing. And then keep your ears open for the AIDA, Adventure Voice Acting class, because we're the only ones teaching it.
Yeah, the difficulty is there's not a lot of spaces that you can
I
go
can only do 5 people at a time.
officially learn these things. You need to figure out how to do that. And how most of us got into it is they started in the acting side and then moved over partially into the writing as well.
Yeah, there's
So-
more acting jobs than there are writing jobs than there are directing jobs.
Right, but then at the same time, the writing jobs last longer than the acting jobs often do. So you want a little marriage of both so that you can eat food and live in a place.
You get food? Okay. Obviously I do, but. All right, so that's it. We're out of time. But thank you for hanging out with us, and hope you had a great con, and hope to see you again.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Bye, guys.